Welcome to the minimal increment demo for Team ByteSizeBandits. Today we will be going over the progress made from the skeletal increment to the minimal increment through a live demo, as well as various updates to the project and its timeline. In the previous update, the walkthrough showed various pieces of information and game status being passed to different components of the game, but it was not playable at the time. As you will see in today's demo, the UI is now interactive, and additional information can be seen by the user in play rather than just in the log. Now for the demo.
So we're going to do a quick demo on the web application for playing the game. We'll also do a quick demo on the whole app UI that we have set up so far. So if we start the main games URL, which goes from / will automatically redirect to games internet. So if we go to our local app, it should redirect us to the main game terminal. In this case, it shows all of the past or active games that are running. If we make this a little bit wider, we can see these are ended games, and it will redirect us to the score, which we can talk about a little bit later. If we go to the bottom left and right, that shows us the connection of our backend API, which is a REST microservice. We see on the bottom left the current commit and build version of this application, along with the actual connection to the backend. As well as that, we have the Games tab and Templates tab. So we're currently on the Games tab, but we can also go to the Templates tab. So essentially, when you create a game, you can pick a template, which will be the question pool that actually gets generated when you start the game. In this case, we have two random games that have tags that are associated with them. In this case, we have Summer Party and A through F. Summer Party is just a random junk data, and A through F is a beefier question set that just allows us to prove the concept of the game. Obviously, this is just generic data that a user could then change on their own. From there, we have the new game button. So if we click this, it'll bring up a pop-up dialog, which we can then give the game name, the template, and a brief description, which is all user validated. In this case, if we start typing and we blur the input, it will tell us that is a minimum of 10 characters. In this case, we can simply do demo tests, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In this case, the two templates that are available on the backend show up as an optional combo box. We will select A through F, and then we can just give a generic content, which in this case, if we enter in content in blur, or if we do nothing in blur, it's totally fine. In this case, a description is completely optional. From there, we would click Start Game, and this will take us to the actual game. You'll notice there's a couple of fields, but before we talk about those, let's pretend like we're sharing this to another user. So what we would do is we would copy the game URL, and since we don't have authentication set up just yet, that's going to be the next thing that we work on. We'll give it a fake user ID, in this case, let's say 2. And what we'll see is if we refresh both pages, they will then register the new edition of the user. And there's a couple of fields that we want to go into before we even start the game. So we've got the basic footer that shows the backend connection, but in this case, we have an additional session that were generated when the game starts. So we have our backend REST API, which is all the static data for generating the templates in the game, but we also have a WebSocket connection that pairs multiple users. And in this case, we've got 2 users, but if we were to add an additional link with a separate UUID, we'll see more users join, which can then be used to determine who goes next in the game. We also have a synced timer, which when you create a game, we store the start date as a simple datetime field in MySQL. And this allows all of the users to know, what current state of the game they're watching or they're playing as a group of people. We also have the name of the game and the round and the current spin of the number of spins available. On the left, we see we are currently user 1. On the right, we see we are user 2. It also says you, so users know. And then also in this case, on the left, they are the host. They have the option to start and end the game. Only other users have the option to leave. If we go ahead and press start, we will notice that we get a couple of tooltips that show the nominated user and the fact that the game has officially started. And then we also have our spin board. If we also refresh, we can see that there is a game board that is also generated. In this case, users that aren't able to play, it will show the user that is spinning, which once we add authentication, just to repeat, we can then show the name of the user that is associated with that ID. Obviously, in end functionality, we don't want to show user IDs. We would want to show actual identity information. All right, so if we start to play, we can simply click on the board, it will spin, and in this case, we went bankrupt, so we got no points, and the next user has the option to spin the board. We do the same thing. If we go this, in this case, we actually got a column of D. In this case, the category is D. That's worth 200 points. The way this generic junk data is set up is it's essentially whatever the question is the answer. So in this case, what is D1? Well, it's obviously D1. So when you do that, we're going to notice a couple of UI changes. In this case, 2 was correct. We got the points, which was 200. We see that the column row for this point value was removed from the pool by the 2 hyphens, and then the left-hand user is able to then play. In this case, it would just repeat this finite state machine until the number of rounds has gone to 50. In this case, we obviously are on spin number 2. So as the host, I can then go again. In this case, I got a question of B worth 200 points. What we could do is we could say it should be B1, but in this case, let's say no, which is not right. In this case, we get negative 200 points. We lose that little part of the question from B, and it goes to the next user, which would then keep repeating until we get all the way to the next round. Okay, so it's been a couple of spins. One thing that I wanted to go through quickly was the current functionalities that we support in the game model. So as the users are able to progress through the sections, they can answer prompts and it will update the scores. The one thing that we do want to additionally add is support for group nominations based on opponent's choice. So we haven't had a chance in this current demo to show what happens when you click on it just due to the low probability, but essentially what happens is a dialog pops up, and any user that is not the current user ID that picked it would have the option to do a multiple choice. And what we're going to do then, based on that, is simply do an average score and then just pick the top average based on all of the other users. So it's similar to if you've ever played CSGO and you want to kick a user out of a session. Essentially, everyone votes on whether you would kick that person. It's the same thing in this case. One of the other features that we want to add on top of this is simply when you do get an answer correct, then we simply re-nominate the same user. So we have the nominations working, and in this case, for the sake of this demo, we simply re-nominate the next user to show the continuous ping-ponging between different users playing in a live environment, since we are using a WebSocket. So in this case, WebSockets are using HTTP2. A user, when they do an event, we have it so every other session can see the event that other user drew. So if we were to do something like this, we got E. If we do like no, we will see that user 2 was wrong, and we are now nominating user 1 on both sides. So everyone playing the game can see what's going on in real time. So if, for example, you were in a game with like 5 people and it was just blank the whole time, you wouldn't know what's going on. In this case, you can see what every user is kind of spinning, in addition to seeing the game board kind of continuously populate and scores update based off of that. So we can continuously play this until we get to the end of round 2. Obviously, we're currently on round 1. To also simulate what happens when a game ends, we can just simply end the game. So if I'm like the host and I want to rage quit, by me being the host and ending the game, everyone else gets booted. So in this case, if I click end game, we will notice that both users get redirected to the end game flow, which in this case, we were playing demo test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can see that there were 2 out of 4 players. In this case, we default to a max of 4, but that's simply a basic field that we can change. The status is ended, and the user can click on it to then view the score of the game. All right, so in this case, we are also in round 2, which means all of the points are doubled. So if we continue to play and we spin on the left, this is worth 600 points on E, which in this case is going to be doubled to be worth 1,200 points, as in the table. So in this case, we're currently 400. If we click on E3, which is correct, we'll note that our points get much more than added by an additional 600 points. And obviously, the game continues to play until we get to spin 50 of 50 of round 2, which we will then get to game end. All right, so in this case, we are at round 2, and we are at the last spin. We have 1 question left, and based on this, the game will then end. So we have user 2. If they spin, in this case, they have to spin again, and the game would then end, which will then redirect the users. And then if we go to the score again, we will see that the user with the highest score is the winner in this case, which they had a score of 1600 as opposed to 600. And we see in all bolds, and they have the nice crown, that they are officially the winner.
Based on feedback from stakeholders for previous checkpoints, as well as effort expended by the team to date, the project plan has some minor updates that are not expected to create delays beyond today's demo. Due to the supplementary skeletal increment demo video submission on August 9th, the minimal increment demo needed to be postponed 2 days beyond the expected due date in order to properly execute both items. This also delayed the hardware and UI setups as resources were devoted back to the previous submission. Both hardware and UI setups are in progress as of today, August 11th. Additionally, the size and labor estimates have been updated. As the team gets further into development, we are more aware of resources required to complete the game. Based on current progress, we expect the base game to contain at least 3,000 lines of code, with an understanding that that figure may increase as any additional features are added, time permitting. Mirroring the total LOC, expected labor hours have increased slightly from 200 to 250 hours, with an understanding that that figure may also increase as any additional features are added. Aside from minor updates to the requirements and design docs, such as adding or removing attributes discovered during development from any objects, no major adjustments have been made since the last review. Thanks to feedback from stakeholders, our team has identified a few additional risks and developed contingency plans as appropriate. The critical risk being a misalignment and understanding of the stakeholders' expectations against our interpretation of the project description and deliverable rubrics. As mentioned earlier, the skeletal and minimal increment demos have experienced slight delays from expected completion. When completing the skeletal increment demo, we left off a working demonstration of the communication between subsystems, as no source code was interpreted as not showing any code. After correcting this misunderstanding, the plan for the minimal increment demo has also been revised to focus efforts on executing the minimal core game functionality required, rather than a completely developed GUI. In light of the realization of the risk, the team outlined a new contingency plan to avoid similar mistakes in the final deliverables. When our mistake was brought to our attention, clarifying questions were asked to obtain an exact understanding of what was needed for each project component, as well as agreement on an updated timeline. Mirroring this response, asking for clarification either in office hours or via email when multiple interpretations of rubric requirements may exist will help us prevent any further delays. As we near the finish line for Wheel of Jeopardy's Go Live, development will continue. Project testing will begin with a targeted completion date of August 22nd, the day before the final project due date. August 22nd is also the expected submission date for peer evaluation forms from all team members, as well as final sign-off on the finished product from everyone. Once everyone signs off, the target system increment demo will be recorded and submitted, no later than August 23rd, the original project completion date. Thanks for your time.